Good morning. I am Major Roach. I am the faculty advisor for the Honor Council here at Hargrave. And I would like to welcome the administration, faculty and staff, and of course, our Corps of Cadets to this year's Honor Council robing ceremony. Our speaker for today is Director of Academics, Dr. Jim Tung. He will be speaking to you on the importance of integrity in our honor code here at Hargrave Military Academy. Of course, this is a code that's been in place for more than a century, gentlemen. Following Dr. Tung's remarks, we will then introduce and robe the new members for this year's Honor Council, your Honor Council. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn things over to Dr. Tung, if he's here.
Scott,
I'm sorry.
take it.
Yes, sir.
Will allow me to be a poor substitute for Dr. Tung. My name's Sloan Gibson. I'm your interim president. How many of you young men aspire to be leaders? Give me a hand. I'm looking to see if there are any guys without hands up. My hand's up. I aspire to be a leader too. You can put your hands down. I'm 68 years old. I've had not dozens but hundreds of different opportunities, small and large, to be a leader. But I'm still learning and I'm still growing and I'm still aspiring to be a good leader. If you look at our mission statement, it says, Hargrave builds young men into leaders of character. Leaders of character. You know, it's interesting, that same phrase, leaders of character, shows up in West Point's mission statement. Why do you think that is? How many of you have seen a situation where someone was placed into a position of some authority? Note that I didn't say a position of leadership, I said a position of authority. And that person was maybe someone that you couldn't trust. Maybe someone where you weren't confident that that person was going to do the right thing, that was going to place the good of the group ahead of his own self-interest. Perhaps it was someone that you couldn't trust to tell the truth. Can that person be an effective leader? Absolutely not. I see some heads shaking. No, you're right. Absolutely not. Character, honor, integrity is the foundation of leadership. Leadership is a relationship of trust. And without honor, there can be no trust. That is a bedrock of Hargrave. I wore that robe 50 years ago here. I lived by this honor code here 50 years ago. And it happens to be exactly the same honor code that I lived under at West Point. And that I've strived my best to live under ever since. That's the challenge and that's the opportunity for each and every one of you. If you aspire to be a leader, you have to follow the path of integrity, the path of honor. Otherwise, you just find yourself in a position of authority, not in a position of leadership. Understand? Yes, sir. Okay. I guess this is a fitting opportunity and occasion and topic for me to have my first conversation with you, so I'm glad it worked out this way. I'm glad to see all of you here. I'm proud of all of you. I'm proud of the choices that you've made and the choices that you're going to continue to make. If you let it, Hargrave will change your life. And I'm here to tell you the most important way it can change it is what we're talking about right now. It's about living a life of integrity. It's about living a life of honor. And I'm proud to be part of this long gray line, in addition to another long gray line that I belong to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that big overall picture. Let me talk again to reinforce that here at Hargrave, being an educational institution, we try to make sure that we break it down a little bit more. We're going to talk about our 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are not just something we put on the board. It basically helps guide. Are we trying to build men of faith? Ask yourself about how integrity and honesty with yourself, how does that fit into being a man of faith? As an athlete, the importance of honest play, the importance of understanding how to get better, which means sometimes you have to be honest with yourself about your effort, as well as be honest with your classmates. And then, obviously, as an academic. So one of the things that I want to briefly talk about is that in my public school, as a young man, the honor code was something that was just sort of out there. It was right up there with be a good person. Wasn't very tractable. If you happened to not get in trouble, life was good. If you got in trouble, God help you. And I say that as a secular philosophy back then. You were in trouble, you didn't know how to get out. And so what we're trying to do here is put up some guidelines for you. So let me give you my one academic story, and then maybe talk a little bit about how to avoid these issues in the academic world. So probably as a young man, if you can imagine me with a mullet and t-shirt and jeans hanging out, I think some of you may have seen the pictures in the barbershop. But I met a man named Lederman. At that time, he was the director of the National Accelerator Laboratory, so all you physics guys know who he is. Being a somewhat arrogant 18, 19-year-old or 20-year-old at the time, didn't know much about him. I'd heard his name, kind of saw that he was the director of something or another, and really didn't sink into me until several years later that he was about 30 days away from getting the Nobel Prize in physics. The National Medal of Science was one of the things that he received a little bit thereafter. He's written a bunch of books, a bunch of other awards, and essentially is now, or was until he passed away a couple years ago, considered one of the brighter minds of the 20th century. And one of the things that perked me up, though, because I was sitting there, it was July or so. Chicago is hot and muggy. Some of you may sympathize with that right now. And I was a science intern at a national lab there, which simply meant that I got to wear a t-shirt and jeans underneath my lab coat back in the day, because I was just an intern. But Dr. Lederman's story that day was along the lines of he would look out at us, and you can see the parallel, I hope, and he understood, and this fascinated him to no end. In fact, he ended up writing a book or two about this, that the future would not be discovered, the future scientific discoveries would not be made by guys wearing suits, guys in multi-million-dollar projects, people that have been recognized as being bright, upcoming folks or established experts in their field. Instead, what he saw was a future scientific discovery being made by someone who was sleep-deprived, who was tired, whose special somebody was nowhere near their lab, because back in that day it was a male-dominated field, probably wearing rumpled t-shirts and jeans, surrounded by discarded cans of soda, and cups of coffee. Probably pretty fuzzy-brained for all this, and it's probably in some scenic part of the world like North Dakota or Antarctica. And so being in that position, they'd be constantly tempted to do what? Why don't you move to the city where you'll make more money, you'll get better pay, better conditions, and instead, otherwise you can sit here and be sleep deprived, be tired, and then maybe one day change the world. Now, being that 20-year-old full of vim and vigor that I was, basically, I took it the way he meant it, which was to be an inspiration to stay the course and keep on keeping on. But with the benefit of 30 years of experience, and I look back on it, I realized that action right there was essentially pivoted on the point of honesty. That in there, it is so tempting to cheat, okay? Because if I discover something that sounds pretty good, suddenly people will give me things like money and recognition. I won't have to work quite so hard. And so without trying to embarrass anybody, we saw that happen here in America about 20 years ago. Back at that time, there was a struggling physician, and basically he was struggling because he was supposed to be a researcher, didn't really like doing clinical work, and he worked in virology, which probably all the folks these days have Facebook medical degrees, and so they know all about virology. But 20 years ago, it was a somewhat obscure topic, particularly if you're a medical professional, particularly if you were a pediatrician, which meant that you were dealing with unhappy, sick kids. But that sounds pretty sexy when you're in medical school, not so good later on when you're in your late 30s trying to get your way through the world. So what did he do? Again, some of you may know this already. He saw 12 kids in front of him. Turned out the 12 kids, he had a medical history on those 12 kids. And he saw that of those 12 kids, there were 3 or 4 that exhibited symptoms of what he called autism. In fact, 3 or 4 out of 12 is a huge number. And then he went and said, well, you know what I noticed is that a couple of these kids never got their measles vaccine. He's a virologist, right? So of interest to him. And then as he looked at his data, what he discovered was that of the folks that did not get their vaccine, they were pretty much normal students. In fact, what he found was 100% of his students or of his subjects actually ended up with autism spectrum disorder. And so he goes off and writes a quick little note, about 200 or 300 pages, off to the British medical journals. And what happens? He ends up becoming pretty famous. If you're basically telling the world that you don't need to take, or that if you take this vaccine, which is required for most children, your chances of getting autism are some very, very large number. Anybody actually know where his research group came from, his research study? Anyone want to venture a guess? I'll give you a hint. They're all 8 years old. There was clowns and balloons. It was a birthday party. These 12 children, who were they? They were the friends of his son. Okay, so suddenly what we see here is, and if those of you are familiar with autism spectrum and you're familiar with the anti-vaccine movement, what has happened there? Because of this man's desire to maybe tell a little fib or a big whopper, what happened to him? He doesn't have to work anymore. In fact, I'm not sure if this is a good part of the story or not. He's a multimillionaire now. He commands 4, 5, 6 figures to go to institutions and have a quick chat, to be part of a seminar series, or in fact, he has a foundation of his own, in which case he gets paid a lot of money. But think about the misery. Think about the impact that he's had in all this time. Okay, not necessarily because he thought this all the way through, but a frustrated man in the middle of perhaps a life crisis. I don't want to speak for him. Perhaps in terms of a true concern that there was a very large fraction of his son's friends who had autism reached for a theory, reached for something, and in turn, what has actually happened? That idea of lying, cheating, or stealing probably didn't occur to him at that time. Again, making it sound super dramatic. Nobody really ever sets out and says, I want to be in front of the honor council. No one ever says to themselves, one day my friends will remember me and it will sabotage my ability to be a leader. No one ever says, one day I will be stuck somewhere because of a decision I made in the past. And so the honor code, again, this pledge not to lie, cheat, or steal, and really, and this is the hard part in today's society, turn in those that do, that gets increasingly difficult because, we can go and say, what's it really going to matter? Who is going to remember this? Okay. We're not talking about the lives of millions. It's just my life. But remember, men, we're more than just ourselves. You are a classmate. You are a teammate. One day, you'll be someone special, somebody, a husband, a father. That's what we're playing for now. And so the question is, if we never want to do that, and I've sort of laid out the temptations to do it, how do we avoid it? First and foremost, simply communicate. It's a relationship. If you think that you may be crossing a line and you're starting to violate the spirit of what your faculty member wants you to do, cheating, right? The idea is, first and foremost, have the courage to start the conversation with your faculty member. It will help you. One day you'll have the courage to have that conversation with a teammate, have that courage to have that conversation with your significant other. You have to start somewhere. I would suggest respectfully, this is as good a place as any. The lying piece. Again, it isn't what you said to your buddy that he believes or doesn't believe. At the end of the day, in the beginning of the day, you look at someone in the mirror. I would again respectfully suggest that the lying piece is corroding your relationship with yourself. Okay, so take a look at that. And then the stealing. I had a boss one day talking about stealing and kind of laughing about it a little bit as he was very frustrated at the time. We were talking about honor code violations, and he said, all these guys, what do they think stealing is? That means that, Kevin down there, he goes and gets a ski mask, and he puts it over his head, and then he goes and finds a firearm, and then he takes that, and then he goes and finds Andrew, who doesn't know who he is because he's got a ski mask on, and recognizes that he has a weapon, and then basically takes his wallet with all his money in it. Is that stealing? Sure. But really, if I go and walk off with Kevin's Walkman or MP3 player, not to date me there, MP3 player, and I'm pretty sure that he won't mind because we're buds, and I don't really know when I'm going to return it, but I will because I'm not a thief. But Kevin doesn't know where it's at, doesn't know where it's coming from, and doesn't know who has it. Right there, having that conversation with yourself or with Kevin basically kind of highlights whether or not that's actually stealing. And so one of the great challenges here then, last but not least, as a tip of the hat back to our English department, because I know they really like me to expound on this more. My last comment is about plagiarism. Plagiarism is all three of those. You're stealing someone else's academic ideas, in order to profit from it. Namely, you don't have to do a whole bunch of work. You'll get a whole bunch of points. You'll get a whole bunch of acclaim. And basically, you're going to lie to people about claiming it as your own and again, imply that somehow you're more worthy than you might if you just turned in a blank sheet of paper. So keeping in mind that I know it's been a busy first day, a lot of things going on, and I know it's a busy end of the week, and we still have things going on in our schedule today. Hopefully some thought between the kind comments of Mr. Gibson, and then hopefully as you think about what was the academic dean talking about, how did that apply to you and how will it apply to you? Because as men, respectfully, you will be tempted, you will make a decision, and it will impact you. Thank you very much.
Once again, I'd like to thank President Gibson, Dr. Tung, for those words of wisdom. Okay, gentlemen, we're going to announce the 9 members who will represent you on the Honor Council this year. These 9 members were nominated by you, and then they were voted on and selected by the Hargrave Military Academy faculty and staff. When your name is called, please report to the front so that you may be recognized and receive your robe from the Commandant and the President. Hold your applause, please, until everybody's been robed. Thank you. Madison Durr, please come forth. Michael Salas, please come forward. Nasir Coles, please come forward. Logan Rader, please come forward. Sage Wood, please come forward. Drew Poston, please come forward. Patrick Souza, please come forward. John Klassen, please come forward. Charlie Wall, please come forward. To the administration, faculty and staff, and the Corps Cadets, I give to you your Honor Council.